This is the last day when we're on the whiteboard collecting information, figuring things out, and using our brain to plan things before we actually jump into cooking stuff up. Now, what we're gonna do today is we are going to officially create something called a pricing model. That's gonna be our pricing model. Let me tell you what this means. When you talk to a company that's making $500,000 a year versus when you talk to a company that's making $100,000 a year, your conversations are not going to be the same for both of these companies. Therefore, you should not treat these two companies the same. What a pricing model is going to help you do is apply your pricing to different size companies and different level complexity companies while keeping the foundational structure of your pricing the same. That way, you don't underprice yourself or overprice yourself based on who you're talking to. Now, the reason this is very important is because there's a lot of moving gears that could affect pricing. So the number we found earlier, 3,920, this number is how much our system is valued to the industry. And that's in comparison to the problem it's solving. This number right here is not the actual pricing. This is literally the actual value of the thing we're creating, the raw skeleton of where the value lies in an average world in this industry. Let's just call it $4,000 for easy numbers. This doesn't mean this is the price of our system. This is the starting point for knowing where to start pricing our system. Obviously, we're not going to charge $4,000 for every single system because we know that some companies are going to want more complexity, some are going to have less complexity than others. Now, this doesn't mean this is the price of our system, but this gives us the starting point for knowing where to start pricing our system. And obviously, we're not going to charge exactly $4,000 because we know that some companies need more complexity, some require less complexity than others. So now what we're going to try to do is figure out, one, what are these things that could be affecting that pricing? And then we're going to create a pricing model that's going to apply to different companies based on their environments, their sizing, their complexity, all these different things that we're going to look at. This is one of the trickiest parts of this business right here. It's understanding your own value and your own pricing and being able to accurately quote your pricing to different companies based on their environments, based on their complexity, based on their size, based on all these different factors that could affect the pricing. I'm going to try my best to explain to you guys how you should do this pricing and what goes into creating the pricing model. Again, what we're doing right now is we're trying to figure out what things are impacting our actual pricing and what our actual pricing should be based on a number of different factors. So before we actually jump into the pricing and the pricing model itself, let's just talk about what those factors could be. So now we're going to actually start creating this. I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to show you guys how to do it very quickly with the assistance of AI. So now we're going to start actually creating it, and I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did earlier. We're going to use AI to kind of brainstorm and put that brainstorming onto steroids. And the way I'm going to do it is through the same exact thing I told you guys earlier. We're going to use a system prompt to create a system prompt for the AI that we want the help from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this system prompt right here, and you guys are watching it right now. Again, this is probably something you're going to have access to by the time you're watching this video, but this is just the system prompt that helps us create other ones that we used before earlier. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to paste it right here, and the next thing that's going to happen is going to say, okay, what kind of system prompt do you want? So at this point, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a brain dump of all the context that we want our AI to do. Now, here's what we're telling it. We're saying, I want a system prompt for an AI whose job is going to be an expert at service/product pricing in a psychologically motivated way. The reason why I'm saying in a psychologically motivated way is, have you guys seen packages where you're looking at different tiers and the second tier and third tier are a little bit more expensive, but they are positioned in a way that grabs you? It's almost like you shouldn't even go to that first tier in the first place just because the value from the second and third tiers is so good. This is the effect that I'm trying to get here for our pricing for our different tiers. We want our actual features and what our AI can do separated in a way that makes it most appealing and makes most sense for people not to join that first tier. We want really motivated companies to not want to go and get the basics. We want them to be on the second and potentially third tier. What we're going to do is we're going to try to do our pricing and our pricing model in this psychologically motivated way. And I'm literally going to explain this to the AI as I do it as well. So we're saying the goal is for me to give this AI a bunch of context information. And this information is literally going to be all of the very important things that we got from our research, such as the number of calls they're getting, what are the features of our voice AI system, what it can and can't do, what is our entire offer, what is our purpose, what is all of that. We're going to give all of it to it, and we're going to try to craft some sort of expert analyst to go back and forth with us to help us, one, create that pricing model, and two, understand our pricing better. So this is how we're going to be putting that brainstorming on steroids. So we're literally telling it we're going to give it a bunch of context information, and I said once I'm done giving it context and information, its job will be to analyze everything and help create a reasonable pricing based on the context it's received. Now here, I should probably change this, and I should probably say create a reasonable pricing model based on the context it's received. I'm going to actually add one more thing right here, and I'm going to say the goal for the pricing model is to be able to apply our structural pricing concepts to different businesses that vary in complexity, sizing, and number of integrations. I'm literally telling it what is going to affect our pricing, okay? That's going to be how complex the thing is that they want to do, the size of the business, and the number of integrations they're asking about. And then I'm saying we want a definitive way to accurately price our services based on who we're talking to. I continue by saying its goal is to create pricing in a psychologically driven way, aiming at the psychology behind tiered pricing in a way that places certain features, options / system integrations in a way that leans the customer towards our higher packaging, but still makes any first tier packaging very enticing. This is literally the idea that I explained to you guys earlier. I'm just telling the AI so that way it knows where we are mentally when trying to create the pricing packages that we're trying to create right now. And then we're saying this AI will go back and forth with me in almost a consultative way until it gets all the information it needs before starting the pricing / structure / tiers creation. This is a very important sentence. If I don't say this, then the AI is just going to try to blab out answers to me. This is me telling it, hey, look, I want you to ask me questions and go back and forth in a consultative way before giving me the answer that we're trying to look for. And this is pretty much all the entire context dump of what we're trying to do. So I'm going to send that to it and let's see what it comes back to us with. All right, so here right now it's cooking up the actual system prompt for the AI that we're going to use to do our goal, which is do this. And you guys can see it's hitting all the different details. I did not have to create this manually. It's creating all of this for us so we don't have to think about it. I'm going to copy this and I'm just going to open up a brand new ChatGPT window. And now we're going to actually use the system prompt that it created for us. So I'm going to paste that in here. And now we're telling it you're an expert pricing strategist AI whose sole objective is to design psychologically sound, structurally consistent, and commercially realistic pricing models. That this is everything that we wanted that we just described. So now I just sent that to it and now boom, it just picked up that role. Now it's in that mindset. And now let's see what it's telling us. It's saying to design a model you can reuse across different size businesses without feeling arbitrary. I need a few specific inputs. What is it asking us for? So we got packaging decision, productized versus bespoke. Are you trying to sell this as mostly standardized product with light configuration or as an implementation service where each client gets a tailored call flow, tools, and integrations? We are doing this as an implementation service where each client gets tailored call flow, tools, and integrations. This means that we're going to walk into a business, figure out what it is that they want, and try to create that system based on what they are doing. This first option means that we're just creating a product and we're going and knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, do you want to buy this? And again, not really from scratch. If you create it once, it's almost like reusable. So I'm just going to start answering these questions that it's asking us. The first one is going to be implementation services. And on to the second question, it says, what does integrations actually mean in your offer? When you say schedule jobs and send notifications, what systems are you expecting to connect to in the first version of your offer? Give me your target list for most common plumbing stacks you want to support out of the box, even if it's just 3 to 6. Folks, this is literally what we researched earlier. I told you guys we had to do this ahead of time. Now you see why. So it's asking us, what are those most common ones? We have the CRM here, and it's already listed Service Titan, House Call Pro, Jobber, Field Edge. We already looked at all of these literally in day 6. And we found out if they have APIs, we found out if they're usable. We did all of that information ahead of time because we need this information to create what we're trying to create right now, which is our pricing plan and our pricing structure. And look, it's also asking us, are you promising native API integrations or are you okay with good enough integrations like blah, 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 blah? Obviously, we're probably going to be using a combination of N8N and Make to do this and webhooks. Right now, it doesn't make sense to you guys, but once we build this stuff, this is going to be the back end for what we're trying to do. So now I'm going to answer the second question by giving it the tiered list that we already ordered in our other whimsical. I'm telling it the most common for small to medium size in the order of commonality, where number 1 is most common are, and I'm just gonna jump back to our whimsical. We already pulled all of this right here. Look at this. Bucket number 2, small to medium size, and we already have them in the correct order. So we have Jobber as number 1, we got House Call Pro as number 2, and then we got Work is. So I'm just going to copy this, jump back in here, and I'm going to paste it. And here's where we did that. We're saying the first one is going to be the most common. I just pasted all of this right here, and I'm going to do the same thing for the medium to large size businesses. I'm telling it, as for medium to large size businesses, they are once again in order of commonality, and I'm going to jump back and grab this first one right here First bucket, which is the ones for medium to large, and it's going to be Service Titan, Service Fusion, and Field Edge. And I'm just going to throw this right back into it. Now, I already pasted a lot of information. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to send this chat and I'm going to say I'll answer the remaining questions in my next chat. Just so that way we're not flooding its context window, basically how much information it can digest and analyze at once. If you put too much information, you're going to get a lower quality analysis. We kind of want to compact the amount of information so that way we can get better analysis at what we're telling it. So I just said I will answer the remaining questions in my next input, and I'm going to send that through. Let's see what we have to answer next. So we got call volume plus concurrency assumptions. It's saying pricing has to scale on usage somewhere. Otherwise, you either punish small shops or undercharge big ones. So for each business size or bucket, what do you consider typical? This is another thing that we already calculated ahead of time. So you guys can see we said for an average small to medium sized business, we're putting them at 105 calls per month. And by the way, we're starting with the bottom line, right? Not the best case scenario. This is literally the worst case scenario that it can get is going to be around 105 calls per month. Because this will apply to all of the plumbers on average. So it's like a big fishing net that captures as many boats of plumbing businesses as we can. And actually, just to validate this, I went into a brand new temporary ChatGPT chat and I said, what is the average number of calls that an average plumber company receives on a month on an average at any given city? You see this answer right here is telling us it depends on the size and the city and all these different things. So I said another message. I said, I want an accurate estimate of what this monthly number would be for small size, medium size, large size. And I told it to research online and find this. So it came back for small plumbing businesses saying it could be anywhere between 80 to 160 calls per month. And look where we are at. We're at 105. So we're literally like almost at the middle of this number that is given us right here between 80 to 160. It's safe to say that this is accurate. Now, how does this compare to medium size? Well, for medium size, it's telling us anywhere between 200 to 400. We'll just say 300. And for large size, it could be anywhere from 400 to 800. We're going to call it at 600. We're going to get the middle point for each of them. So I'm going to take these numbers and I'm going to throw it back into this question right here. Just took those numbers and I said, again, for call volume, 105 per month. For small, 300 for medium, and 600 for large. I'm not going to bother in answering the peak hour concurrency and the after hour share just because we don't really care for those, right? We care about the number that they're getting. I'm not really going to bother in answering these because these don't really affect the actual pricing itself, in my opinion. So I'm just going to ignore these for now, and I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, okay, what does consult and diagnosis really is? This is a major scope/risk variable. When you say it can consult and give diagnosis, which of these is the promise? Are we talking about basic triage plus scripted checks and then booking/dispatching? Is it talking about system-based guidance and probable cost suggestion? Is it doing quote guidance or pricing, or is it doing full troubleshooting flows that reduce the technician visits? Now, here's the thing about this. The level of depth and complexity for how deep it actually troubleshoots has nothing to do with the pricing itself. We want AI to give the same level of diagnostics, troubleshooting tips, helpful tricks, anything that people used to go to Reddit to try and find out or ask other people. Just because all this information is already in the large language model's training data, we don't even have to work hard for it to get to that level. We just have to prompt it. I'm literally just going to say exactly that to it. I'm going to say we're not going to be pricing based on the depth of the consulting and diagnosis that our AI system is doing. So we said for diagnosis, this does not matter. We're not going to change the pricing based on the complexity and the depth of its troubleshooting and diagnosis. The next thing it's asking about is service levels and operational commitment. What this means is if something breaks, what are you promising them? And this service levels, by the way, usually ties to some sort of monthly package. The reason why is because when you sell them a monthly package relating to an AI system that you built, you are giving them an operational commitment. You're saying, I commit to you if something happens like this breaks or this changes or whatever, I will jump on it and I'm going to fix it. So this relates to a monthly recurring pricing. That's why it's asking for support hours, SLA expectations, all these different things. And let's think about it, right? We definitely want to include some sort of monthly package that we can upsell and have them pay us monthly for. And the beautiful thing about voice AI is there's not much that breaks once you actually build it properly. So a lot of times when you do charge a monthly package for a voice AI system, the only things you really have to do is make changes when changes need to be made and make sure that all the different components inside the system work together if you build it good the first time. This one's also tricky because if you're selling this package, this is eating at your time. unless you have some sort of people that you can hire to manage this. And what you can really get away with doing by yourself without having like some sort of person dedicated to do this is mainly support, meaning something breaks, they contact you and you fix it, or making changes to the system. They want it to sound a different way or say something different. This is fairly easy to do because once you build the system, you're going to know the ins and outs of everything and how it works. So if something does break, you're going to be able to pinpoint to what that thing is and most likely get it fixed. But you don't have staff for monitoring at this point. You don't have staff for monthly optimizations. So at this point, we're going to keep this as basic as possible. So I just said we're going to offer basic support. The hours are going to be between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. and that's going to be Monday through Friday. Okay, this is just a small 6-hour window for them to contact you about if there's anything that's broken, if there's anything that breaks with the system. The next thing we have to define is if something breaks, how much time do you need to actually fix it? And this in this industry is called an SLA. Okay, an SLA stands for Service Level Agreement. What this means is if something breaks, I promise that within this time period, we're going to be able to get it fixed and we're going to get it up. So let's just say, for example, you have an SLA of 48 hours and they contact you and they say, hey, something is not working. That means from the time that that request came to you, you now have 48 hours to at least attempt to resolve it. It doesn't have to be fully resolved, but it means you're going to start working on it within that first 48-hour window. And this is a very common thing to include when you sell systems to businesses because they need expectations of what happens when things break. So it's asking us, do you promise an uptime or a response time? Let's say we're going to promise a response time within the first 12 hours and the resolution time, which is the time it takes for us to fix it, is up in the air based on the complexity of the issue. We don't know how complex the actual thing that's broken is, so we can't really promise this ahead of time. Now for the next question, implementation scope and timeline. It says, what does being done actually mean? Now for the next question is going to be implementation scope and timeline. This is saying, okay, if you were to implement a system, how long is it going to take for you to do that implementation and what actually goes into it? Now, this is very tricky to question upfront because all these different customers are going to require different complexity levels. They're going to want their system to do different things. And obviously, based on what the thing is that they actually want, that's what's going to determine what is the implementation scope and what's the timeline. So this is something that we define after we jump on that very first call with the company and you talk to them. You can't really do this ahead of time unless you're selling something that is the exact same across the board, no matter who's buying it. And obviously, that's not what we're doing in our case. So I'm going to tell it we're going to determine implementation scope after we do a discovery call with the company because obviously we're going to need all the information before we do this ahead of time. So I'm telling it exactly that. I'm going to say we're going to determine the implementation scope after we do a discovery call with the company. That's going to be the call that we have the very first time we meet them and try to figure out what's the complexity, what are the actual expectations. That's going to tell us how long it's going to take us and what it's going to take to build what they want. So let's go to the next question, the buyer psychology. Who signs and why they'll pay? Well, what is it asking us here? It says, this shapes tier names, anchors how you defend the number without sounding salesy. It's asking us, who is the buyer? What do they fear the most? And what do they value the most? So it looks like this is asking us for the pain points and for the symptoms and what our actual offer is, which, by the way, again, one of the things that we researched and found out ahead of time because we need it to do everything we're doing right now. So I'm going to go back to our notes and pull that information and give it to it. And thank God we did this consolidation because this has everything that we want, that we care about. And all I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier that I showed you guys, where the snipping tool, if you're on Windows, it's going to be Windows Shift S, and it's going to bring up a tool that's going to let you do a screenshot. You guys are probably not seeing it in the recording right now, but I'm going to screenshot the pain points, the symptoms, and the opportunity to slide in, and I'm going to paste it inside of ChatGPT and let it do its thing. So here, I'm just going to click Control V. You guys can see that image was uploaded, and I'm going to say for buyer psychology, I listed all the pain points and symptoms for what they care about in the image I attached, analyze the image. Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to give it the ROI so that way it knows how to frame those packages, because obviously that's the return on investment that these companies care about in the first place. And again, we did that also in this same notes page on the consolidation day. So I'm just going to copy these and throw it back into ChatGPT. I'm going to say the ROIs are the following, and I'm just going to give it a copy paste dump of literally every single ROI that we found. So boom, I just pasted every single ROI that we found earlier for it, and that's going to be basically what it is that they value the most. It answers this question right here. I'm also going to give it one more thing, which is this sentence right here. It says, we don't increase demand, we stop revenue from leaking out of missed calls, overload, and wasted conversations, because I think this really encompasses the main idea of the value of the system that we're trying to sell them. So I just pasted that right here, and because we have so much information, I'm gonna tell it, hey, I'm gonna answer the rest of your questions in my next input. So boom, we just did that. I'm gonna send it through and let it do what it needs to do. So now it's just telling us the analysis of that picture that we gave it, and it's giving us the pain clusters and all the different pain points that we're aiming for, which is perfect. Now it has a core understanding of what our actual system is, why the companies care about it, which is exactly what it needs to do to be able to help us create the pricing plans and the pricing tiers that we're gonna create next. It's giving us more insight into what our system is actually doing. It has all the different numbers for however many calls, the actual support times, the SLA, everything that we chimed in and gave it information about. And it found out the buyer psychology is going to be driven by missed revenue, overload, payroll waste, and chaos. So here's the rest of the questions. It's asking me, what is your literal pricing structure? Like, what is your actual way of charging these people? Is it going to be a one-time setup fee? Is it going to be only a monthly? What does that even look like? So now we're going to tell it our one-time implementation cost. So what we're going to do next is give it context into the math that we did earlier to basically try to find out what is the value of the system that we're trying to sell on average. And this is going to be very handy for it to psychologically create the pricing around the packages that we need. So boom, here's exactly what I did. I gave it all of the different calculations that we found earlier. I'm saying, hey, look, we want to do a one-time implementation fee plus a monthly recurring for support if they opt in to do it. And then I also told it we did some calculations to find out the average, what is the base skeleton value of a voice system for an average plumbing company. And then I just gave it the calculations. I said, here are the calculations. On average, a small business receives 104 calls per month that are active leads / potential jobs. On average, 27% of those calls are missed across the industry. So again, on average for small businesses, that would be 28 calls, and the average job is around $400, meaning there's a potential missed value of 11K. And I said we want to value our system at 35% of missed value, so we averaged at a price of $3,920. That is everything that we already found out ahead of time. So we are done with that first question. Let's look at the second one. It says you gave call volumes, but I still need to know, are these hard caps? Are they soft caps with average pricing, or just tiered guidance with throttling alerts? So this is saying if a business gets more calls, does the price increase? And realistically, if a business gets 200 calls versus 400 calls per month, once we build our system and we plug in everything that needs to be plugged in, this is going to be usage costs, which if you guys remember, I explained to you guys earlier, there's going to be usage and resource costs part of the system. This is part of the fuel for that system. Remember that car example when I said you're building a car, but the customer is responsible for the fuel that goes into it. So this is talking about those call volumes. This is saying, okay, is this like the actual number of calls that they're going to get, or can they do more than that? But what ChatGPT doesn't know is that the price for this is not going to our pockets. This is just going to be usage costs. It just goes to whatever companies that get paid for how many calls are coming in. And we're going to talk about what those companies are when we build the system itself. So I'm going to say this exact thing to it right here. I told it exactly that. I said, these numbers are simply industry averages. Keep in mind that scaling for number of calls does not benefit or profit us in any way, shape, or form. It's only a resource cost / utilization cost that goes to the parent companies responsible for the volume of usage. And this is going to be carried by the customer based on their own volume of calls. I'm literally telling it we're not responsible for this. And the next question is multi-location handling. And this is a beautiful question. Let me explain to you why, because a lot of people are going to run into this when they're building and selling AI systems, and a company is not actually maybe one location. Maybe they have 6 or 7 different locations. There's a few different ways to look at it. I'm just going to draw it out on the board for you so that way you guys know what's going on behind multiple locations and what you're going to run into. So I'm going to explain to you guys this, and this is something actually very important because you're going to run into this in the wild, and you're going to want to know how to deal with it when you run into it. Now I'm going to split this into 2 different things. Okay? We're going to say here on the left side, we have company A. Okay. Company A has 1, 2, 3, 4 different locations. And we're going to say this little bubble is the external world. Okay. This is where customers are living. Now, this customer just called location A. In this scenario right here with company A, all of these locations are in the exact same operations. They are connected, meaning if this customer talks to location A, he can create a booking here, but he doesn't actually have to go to location A. He could maybe go to location C to get whatever he needs to do done. And the reason why is because all of these locations are using the same exact systems. It means they have one shared CRM between all of them. They have one shared calendar system between all of them. Location B's calendar is location A's calendar. Basically, they share systems, okay? They're not using different systems because they don't operate separately. They operate as one unit. So when you're building an AI system for a situation like this where all the locations operate as one unit, you only have to build the system once. You have to build only one system because you're not having to integrate different applications for each location. They all share the exact same applications, the exact same systems. You don't have to rebuild something more than once. Once you build it once, it's going to be shared by everything. Now let's look at company B. These guys also have 4 different locations, okay? And again, here you have this external world where customers are and a customer calls location A. These are not connected at all, meaning each location operates as its own business. And because each location operates as its own business, they have their own CRM. They have their own calendar. Every single location has its own set of applications that you're going to have to work and integrate with. Meaning, if you build a system, you are only building it for this one specific location because location B is not going to have the same applications as location A. Or it might have the same application itself, but it might be a completely different account. So when you're building a system for a situation like this, you're not actually building one system. You're building one unique system for this location, but when you try to take that system and use it for the next location, you're gonna have to make a bunch of changes. Because again, each location is their own entity. Each one operates as its own business. They're not connected. And these two situations, you're gonna run into a lot in the wild. And you're gonna have to know how to deal with each one. And this situation right here is probably the easiest it's gonna get. You don't have to treat them differently. You don't have to treat them separately. You don't have to do different pricing at all. You only have to look at one set of instructions, one set of applications. Whereas for this one, you are gonna have to probably play a little bit around with the pricing the next time you do another location with them because you're gonna have different variances. Now, the beautiful thing about this situation right here is you're not building the wheel from scratch. You're gonna go from 0 to 100% on location A. When you get to location B, you're actually gonna go from 70% to 100%. So you can get away with charging money, but it's not going to be the same exact amount as this one. It's only going to be for the additional complexity that goes into the second location. Or you also have the option where you can do a deal with them where you say, you know what, look, we're going to charge this exact number per location no matter what the complexity is. And this could also be in your favor because, again, you're not going from 0 to 100% every single time. And that is something you should leverage every single time because in the mind of the customer that you're talking to, you are going from 0 to 100 in that next location. So you can actually get away with charging the same exact number per location but doing 50 to 75% of work less the next time you do it for the next location. This is a very good situation to run into if you're talking to a company that has something like this. So always keep that in the back of your mind that you could leverage the fact that you are doing different locations and pretend that you're going from 0 to 100%. But you're actually not because you already built the majority of the hard stuff in location A. If you're focused on voice AI specifically, this is something you are 1,000,000% gonna run into. Now here's one more thing you have to be aware of if you're dealing with voice AI and selling voice AI. It's called the phone number dilemma. Let me explain what this means to you. Let's say there is, 4 different locations here. And again, here is the external world where all the customers are calling. Now, most likely what happens is this company already has an existing number. They don't want to lose this number. This is a number that they have for several years and everybody knows to contact them through this number. So what happens? The next question they're going to ask you is, will our phone number get replaced? And the answer is most likely going to be no, but this is only depending on what kind of telephony service they're using. Think about it like this. Whichever provider owns this phone number, in order for them to keep this phone number, you have to redirect the call that goes to their number to your voice AI system, okay? You have to set up some sort of call routing. And this call routing is the only way they're going to be able to keep their phone number if every location is sharing that one number. So in this situation, we're talking about all these locations being one thing, okay? They're not operating separately. So if they want to keep this number, you're going to have to set up call routing. That is 9 times out of 10 going to be the answer to your question. And with this call routing setup, what happens is the call is going to hit their phone number and then it's going to be routed to our AI's phone number. I don't know if I told you guys, but your voice AI is going to have its own phone number. And this is going to be something that we configure later when we actually start building the system. So now what happens if each location is operating separately, okay? Meaning there's not one shared phone number, okay, between all of them. Each location has its own number. Some people are thinking, are you going to route every single number to the same AI system? And the answer is no, because remember, these are not operating together. They're operating separately. Meaning if location A has different accounts and different applications and different flows and different everything, location A is going to have its own AI system. And location B is going to have its own AI system. So here you're going to set up call routing only to the specific AI system that pertains to that location. But the answer for keeping people's phone numbers is almost always going to be setting up a call routing policy. And whether that's possible or not fully depends on where that phone number is hosted. And a lot of times it's going to be a phone call to the company that hosts that phone number saying, hey, every single call that goes to our number, it needs to be routed to this other number. And this is something that is done 9 times out of 10. I'm telling you guys this because if you're dealing with voice AI, you're going to run into this situation a lot of times. This is very, very common. So this is how you handle this. Most of the time it's going to be call routing. But again, the type of call routing is going to be different based on if all locations operate as one operation or if all locations operate as different operations. So boom, this is exactly what I just told it. I just explained it to you. I'm not going to read this back to you guys, but I said for multi-locations, we're going to treat it as such. And then boom, here's an explanation of basically everything I just explained to you guys. Now, the next question is going to be ownership of telephony plus numbers. It's saying, do you provide or manage the phone numbers and how are you going to integrate into the existing client's phone system? And I just explained to you guys the situation we're going to deal with. If they already have a phone number they're going to want to keep, we're going to set up call routing. Now, mind you, the phone number that is the voice AI's phone number is going to be part of that resource utilization cost. It's not going to be money that goes in our pocket. And there's actually a few different phone number providers that we could use. So with that being said, we are going to provide them the phone number, but we're not going to be managing the phone number. All we're going to do is we're going to go to that company and we're going to buy a phone number and we're going to host it and we're going to set up all the different configurations, but we ourselves don't own the phone number. So I just said the exact same thing to it as I told you guys. I said for the phone numbers, we're going to use a telephony provider, which is going to own the number. This is going to be part of the resource utilization cost carried by the customer. We're simply just going to create their accounts and configure it. As for integrating into the client's existing phone system, the number one thing we're going to do is just set up call routing into our AI system's phone number. We're not going to try to integrate directly into their existing phone number provider. And it looks like this is the final question. So I'm going to send everything through and let's see what happens. What we just did is literally a beautiful process. We used AI to do all of the brainstorming and we put it on steroids by letting the AI take a specific role and run through all of the context. We gave it a huge context dump of all the information and research that we did ahead of time, which by the way, the fact that we did this ahead of time is amazing because you guys can see the questions it asked us is literally based on the kind of research that we already did. And this literally proves to you and tells you why we did the research we did and how important it actually is. You guys can see almost every question it asked us natively on its own had something to do with a part of the research that we did ahead of time. So this tells me that we did the right thing with our research. And guys, this is what business is about, right? It's literally understanding the why and the how behind your own business logic, including all the different details that make the heart of your service matter in the first place and why anybody would even care about it. Now, this right here is not just some random AI blob text. This is something that we got back after using an extensive big system prompt to hone in on specifically what it is we're trying to do and maximize the AI's ability to do that for us. And you can see this analysis is driven by all of the different business contexts, all the research, all the data, everything we gathered to get to this point that we're at right now. So this analysis is not random, right? Obviously, we got it from a big context dump of everything we spend time researching and finding. And this is a perfect example of how AI as a tool can give you clarity around your business logic, around your business decisions, around everything that you're trying to do in a way that makes it easier for you to do it without having to rely on figuring out for the first time. So this right here is extremely valuable because understanding it, analyzing it, and getting it in the first place is what very good businesses do by nature, by heart. This is what a lot of business schools and courses try to teach people how to do naturally. And truth is, the more you do this, the more naturally you're going to be able to do this kind of analysis that the AI is doing for you right now. Now, the reason I'm showing you guys this right now is because I know a lot of you guys are not in business, or at least you're starting into it. You're just now jumping into it. And I don't want you to feel like you're left behind because maybe you don't understand this stuff. So I want you to look at the process that we did, why we did it, how we got to the point we got to right now, and why it even matters in the first place. Because this is what it means to use AI to figure out those hard core business logic problems, pricing, structure, all that good stuff. So with that being said, let's just dive into this analysis and see what is behind the core logic behind our business offer and our pricing. Now, looking at this very first section right here, which is talking about validating our valuation logic. This is how we got to our $3,920, which is the valuation that we gave our own system in this industry. What this is telling us is we are positioning ourselves as a revenue recovering mechanism, which gives us an argument and a defense for basically any price point that we're going to end up talking to them about. And this is very important because when we end up talking to people on these calls, we're going to have to use this exact positioning right here and show them that, hey, you have a lot of leaks in your business, you're losing a lot of money, we're here to help you recover that. So this is the defense that we're taking for our pricing, no matter whatever that pricing actually ends up being at. And I really like this. I think this is very, very important. I'm actually gonna copy it and throw it in our notes because I think this is something that we're gonna come back to later when we start talking to people. Now, scrolling down here, it's telling us that we are internally framing ourselves as obviously 35% of that missed value, but to the world, to the external world, we're pricing the system as only a fraction of the revenue it prevents from leaking, not the revenue that it generates. Now, this helps us justify pricing in slow months and position ourselves as operational insurance, meaning this is something that plugs into your existing operation and makes sure that money goes back. It's not something that generates money or generates leads. Now, with that being said, we can now move on to the second bit of this, which is the pricing architecture. This is the framing of our pricing. And here's telling us we have three different layers or three different parts to our pricing. The first part is going to be our one-time implementation fee. And here's what that's going to cover, okay? That's going to cover our system design and call architecture, which is how those call orchestrations are going to actually happen. Remember, I talked to you guys about call orchestration earlier and understanding the call process. This is going to be part of that configuration. And then you have FSM specific configuration. This is relating to those specific platforms that they use. Jobber, House Call Pro, Service Titan. Obviously, we're going to be responsible for those configurations and those integrations. And we're going to be responsible for the intake logic, the routing, the triage, and the data handling. Meaning, when the voice AI collects data from a customer, we have to figure out and create the rules that tell it what it needs to do with that information, where to send it, and if there's any rules that exist where maybe it's not supposed to send information for any reason, we have to bake that into it as well. So this is what this means right here. We're also responsible for setting up the phone number and the call routing, obviously, and making sure that we're doing the initial testing and the go live stabilization, meaning we have to make sure that everything is tight knit before it actually gets used in the real production environment. Now, here's why I am telling you this. What I just went through right now is exactly what we're going to be telling our customers when we jump on calls with them, when they ask us what goes into our one-time implementation fee. This is literally it. So if they ask you, hey, why are we paying this much? What are you guys actually doing? This is exactly what we're going to be referencing and telling them. And this is amazing that we can pull it out because this all came from our research. And we are 1,000,000% going to use this later in our conversations because people will ask what goes into this. And we didn't even have to work hard for us to figure out the reasoning behind our one-time implementation fee. Here's everything right here. Now, I just want to highlight one more thing right here. Look at this note right here. This is literally what I told you guys earlier. You have to understand that the pricing itself for that one-time implementation, it's going to scale or go up with the number of integrations, the difference and complexity of the call flows, and the different sizes and whether the business is small business, medium size, or large size business. Not with the call volume itself. We don't care how many calls are coming in. So you have to keep this in mind when you're talking to people when you actually get to that point. This is very important because you're gonna have business owners, they're gonna tell you, hey, I want my system to do this in this system and take information and put it here and send notifications here. They're going to tell you a million different things. We are going to be keeping track of what those things are in the back of our minds, the actual actions that need to be done, because that's going to tell us how much work we're gonna have to put in to make that happen, and how many integrations we're gonna have to cook into our system to make that happen. This is a very, very important point. So I'm also gonna take this, copy it, and throw it in our notes as well. We are 1,000,000% gonna be using this when we have those conversations. Now, the second part of our pricing, or the second layer, is gonna be that monthly recurring revenue, okay? And now look here, what this is telling us is part of our support package is gonna be maintaining and configuring business changes, handling the telephony and everything relating to the phone number, and basically making changes to the system and basically fixing things if things break, okay? And we already know this, but again, we have to also keep this in the back of our minds when we're talking to people, because these are going to relate directly to the kind of questions that the people are going to be asking you. People want the kind of insurance that tells them, hey, you're going to be there when something breaks or if they want to make changes. So this is just what we're outlining right here with our second pricing layer, which is going to be that monthly recurring revenue with the support. And finally, the third layer, or that third cost that's involved in anything we do, is going to be that usage resource utilization cost. We already said this does not go to us at all, okay? This is going to be something totally separate, but it's very helpful to keep this note right here, because again, you are going to have questions about this when you're talking to businesses. They're going to ask you about the telephony, the phone numbers, the call routing, all the different configurations and parts of the system that you're not really going to be responsible for in terms of pricing. You're not going to be profiting from it. And this is literally every single pricing bit in our pricing architecture. These are the three main things. So now, obviously, because different businesses are going to be different sizes, we're going to have to treat businesses differently based on their complexity and their size. That means businesses are going to have to be classified under a specific tier that they're going to fall into, and we have to recognize what that tier is when we're talking to them. So right now we're going to talk about what those tiers actually are, what goes into that, and why. In this first comment, it says the tiers should scale not by the features, but by operational exposure. What does that mean? A lot of people try to do their tiers based on features and the crazy things that their systems can do naturally. But the reality is, just because some features are more premium does not mean that that feature has the same level of impact on what the company wants it to do and how it affects them. So what this is saying is we're going to design our tiers not by the features themselves, but by their impact on the company's operation and what they're exposed to in their day-to-day operation. What do they feel the most pain in? So I'm gonna give you an example, right? Let's say you're operating at level 1, all right? That is the first, easiest, smallest level they are operating at. What are the risks that you're dealing with at this level 1? Obviously, it is a much lower operational risk than a business that's operating in level 10. So let me show you a quick example, right? Let's say you're operating at business level 1. That is the smallest entry level. The things that you are dealing with in comparison to a business operating at level 10 is not the same. Obviously, it is very, very different. Level 10 business, their operational exposure is going to have a lot more gaps where they could be losing a lot more revenue and feeling more pain, literally because their operations is more complex. So because of that, we're going to focus our tier based on how heavy their operation are and how heavy their workload is based on the tier they exist in. So here we have tier A. This is going to be small business operations, right? It's going to involve a lot of Jobber, House Call Pro, and Workers, which are very common systems in this space right here. It's talking about 100 and 150 calls per month. You have a single operational entity, not many different locations, not many different tiers, usually run by an owner or a small office team. Now, this is where we based our base valuation pricing lives, okay? This is where we based our initial number off of, which is the $3,920. Now, as you get to tier B, now you're looking at people that are exiting this tier A, the small business operation level, and are just now growing into the medium-sized business, or they're already in the medium-sized business. And here you're gonna notice a few slight differences that are very, very important. These guys are gonna have higher call density, gonna have more calls coming in. They're gonna have different dispatcher roles. The dispatchers are gonna be responsible for doing different things. And literally because of that, these guys are gonna have more revenue leaking during their peak hours. Also, because their operations are more complex, obviously their CRM or FSM is going to have a lot more complexity to it in the way that it's used. So businesses at this tier are going to be feeling that overload, okay? So what this tells us is businesses at this tier they're feeling pain from overload, right? They're at the point where they are overloaded with things. But maybe they can't really afford to pay a huge team or a lot of different employees to take care of that overload. They're just about to break through into that next tier. They're trying to grow into it. And so just like this point right here, it says the blast radius of failure is much larger. It means there's a much higher chance of those pain points and symptoms that we found earlier happening here. And because of that, this affects multiple people and a lot of different parts of the revenue much higher than the small tier. So our voice AI system or any kind of AI system that we're building is naturally more effective at this tier and is more wanted in this tier because this is where the pain is felt the most. This is where the people are thirstier to take care of those little gaps. This is where they're feeling that pressure. Now, if we go to tier C, which is the larger or the multi-team operations, literally just because their operations are bigger and more complex, it means we have a much higher responsibility for making sure that whatever we're building and whatever we're delivering does what it needs to do at the level of complexity and speed that these businesses operate in, which means there's going to be a lot more work and responsibility on our end to make sure that we are stress testing that system and we're designing it and building it in a way that can handle everything that they're doing, right? We need it to withstand their larger operation, meaning there's going to be more risk on our end to make sure our promise happens at this level, which is why we are justified a higher level implementation fee at this level, even though the AI is still doing the same thing as the previous level. At this stage, it is just more critical and hurts more if things are failing. And then this fourth final point right here is talking about the multi-location and the phone system decision. And then this fourth point right here is talking about the multi-location decisions and the phone system decisions. I'm not going to go too much into this because this is pretty straightforward. Okay, we're going to be relying a lot on call routing, and if their locations are already tied, then we're going to be treating it as one system, whereas if they're separate, we're going to have to treat that as a little bit of a different system with a little bit of variance between each of them. I already explained that to you guys, so this is basically what that is talking about right here. Now under this, you're going to see a small section right here which is talking about how we are going to be framing this when we talk to people. Folks, this is going to be baked into the back of our minds when we talk to people. This is going to be how we're going to be presenting ourselves. This is the core justification behind our pricing, why we're covering those pain points, and how we're going to be able to do that for them. So read this. It says, we don't price based off of AI features or minutes. We price based off of how much revenue your phone system is currently leaking and how much operational stress that is creating. This is a very, very important key thing to keep in the back of our minds when we're having our conversations with these businesses. And here is the justification behind our one-time implementation fee, also the monthly fee, and also the monthly cost. So I'm also going to take this and throw that in our notes as well. Look at this right here, okay? We are getting a response for pushback. Obviously, we're probably going to be getting pushback for why some companies don't want the system. And this is a beautiful point right here that pushes on that pain point saying, look, your team is not perfect. And because every call that is coming in is not answered perfectly, especially during those peak hours. And look at this right here. We're getting a response for pushback. Obviously, we're going to be getting some pushback from companies on why they don't need the system. Now, this is beautiful right here. It pushes on that pain point. It says, look, your team is not perfect, because if every call was answered perfectly without burnout during peak call hours or, without missing calls, that would mean you're a perfect business, which means there would be no reason for any business like us to exist in the first place. And the reason we exist and we're doing this is because we know there's times where call systems and call operations collapse under pressure, and there's a lot of revenue that is missed because of that, which is where we come into the picture and we plug that hole for you. This is also going to be something that we're going to want to keep in the back of our mind, just because we always want to frame to people the reason we exist is because they are having a problem. And if that problem didn't exist, we wouldn't even be here in the first place talking about anything we're talking about. Now, this is the core business logic behind our pricing structure. This is the how and the why that basically backs it up. So that way we know what we're doing and why we're doing it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually try to create that exact tier pricing. We're going to figure out what needs to go into those tiers, why things need to go in those tiers, and basically put it all in a CSV for us to reference later when we actually try to talk to people and figure out which pricing makes sense for them. So that's basically what this next step right here is saying. Okay, if you want me to convert this architecture into the pricing, set those ranges, blah, 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 let me know, and then we'll see where that goes. So I'm going to say, go ahead and do it, and then we'll see what comes out of it. And we might have to make some tweaks and adjustments to it just because, we might not find it perfect the first time it came out from the AI. But you gotta understand, it's not making it from BS. It's making it from all of our context, bro. That's what's really cool about it. Everything here is justified, and it's giving you the reasons why. Like it's like giving us everything, bro.
Oh, this is what used to take companies so fucking long just to figure out,
and do properly too, because they don't know how to they know how to do it. And boom, look at that, we just got the final pricing philosophy. Let's just go over it live and see what we got. Okay, Let's see, our one-time implementation fee. What I'm gonna also do is I'm gonna try to throw these numbers inside of a CSV. What that means is basically like a Google Sheet, anything that is a spreadsheet that we can keep track of, and actually created a template for you guys, which I'm probably gonna give you if you're watching this video. This is what it looks like, okay? It is very simple, it is very stupid, it is not finalized. We're still probably gonna be adding things to it. And as I go through this, I'm gonna try to take these numbers and put them in a pricing sheet for us. This is gonna be a CSV, Google Sheet, any kind of spreadsheet where we can keep track of this. So I made a very, very simple template, by the way, something you guys can take and copy. By the way, this is not the final version of it. We're probably gonna be changing things, adding things, just making it look better. But here is what I have, right? We have the tier 8 package. This is going to be the base package. We're going to list out which CRMs, if there is more than one that goes into it as part of those integrations. And the same thing for the tier B, which is going to be for the mid businesses. And then we're going to have our premium business package right here. Now, next to that, we're going to have the functionalities. Okay, what are those features that are included into this? And again, this is going to be around their operational efficiency and what they are experiencing at the time that they're experiencing. Now, just because our system can do what it needs to do no matter how much volume is happening, we're probably not going to have too much variance in these different features right here. But I'm just going to keep this right here just for reference, so that when we get to the point of creating our packages, we have something to look at and put down for this. And then here I just put down a tab for support. We're just going to talk about what that pricing looks like and what's going to be part of that support for this package right here. Here we have our one-time cost column. We're going to be putting down what our range for the one-time cost is. And then for the monthly cost for that recurring revenue, we're going to put that here. This is all relating to the base package. And then we basically have the same exact thing for the tier B package, which is for the mid business, and then for the tier C, which is going to be for the premium businesses. Now, our job is to decorate this sheet and add as many columns or add as many details to help us use it like a cheat sheet. The idea is to talk to a company, jump back on this sheet, and figure out exactly where they live. If they live in this package and they want these CRMs and they want these functionalities, we're going to be able to look at our one-time cost and either choose whatever is on this range or probably shift it up or down based on what it is they want. This is going to be our cheat sheet for when we talk to people, so that way we can categorize them in where they belong and what is the pricing for the tier that they belong in. This is the logic behind creating your own pricing structure before you go out to the real world and start talking to people about pricing or selling them something when you don't even know the real reason why it's valued the way it's valued. You have to have some sort of thing to reference. So again, I'm going to give you guys the sheet, but we're probably going to be adding things to it. So now let's go over its actual pricing structure that it came back with us. Okay, it's saying our one-time implementation fee is going to be for small businesses anywhere around 2,500 to 4,000 one time. And obviously the typical platforms this is going to be around is going to be Jobber, House Call Pro, and Workis. This implementation fee is going to cover discovery and the system design, the call flow architecture, and the routing, basically everything that I already talked to you guys about earlier. Now here's the reasoning behind this that it's given us. It is ranged intentionally below the recovered revenue anchor so that the customer or the buyer never feels upside down before the first month. Meaning if they use this for the first month, they are going to probably recover whatever number that they paid that we decided on between this range. And if it does help them out the way that we're planning for it to help them out, then this is going to be justified and they're probably going to want more from us. Now, here's where we're sitting at for the mid markets. Okay, we're looking at an implementation fee starting at 4,000 and ending at 6,500. I'm actually going to probably bump this up to 7,000 just because I think that 3,000 range between them is very, very reasonable, and it's actually more in line with where systems end up in this mid-market operation. And the reasoning behind that, again, there's a higher call density, there is more dispatcher roles, there is going to be more complexity in the CRM, and there's going to be more things for us to put together and test because they have more operational complexity. As for larger businesses, I'm not even going to really say enterprise because these two are two different things, okay? Larger size businesses and enterprise are not treated the same. Most of the time, if you're dealing with an enterprise, you're probably going to want to do a custom quote. And the reason why is because enterprise operations is so different from what you're used to seeing out there in the real common world for anybody in the lower tier before them. What's involved in enterprise is more loopholes, okay? Maybe it's not even complexity, but it's things like legal stuff, call auditing, making sure you're following specific security policies, rules, all these different governance bodies, right? They're governing and they have to make sure that everything around the system has governance. Usually don't have to deal with governance, laws, policies, and rules at this size right here, but when you start hitting enterprise, they're treated differently. So you're probably gonna want to do custom quotes for anything enterprise level. And I'm assuming a lot of you guys at this stage right now, when you're doing this, you're not gonna be really dealing with enterprise. So I'm not gonna cover enterprise in our process right now. And our range right here is from 6,500 to 9,000. This is, again, flexible, but this is where we're usually going to want to sit for those large operations. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start filling out this sheet and seeing if there's anything I need to do to make it better. And the first thing on my mind is when I'm thinking about how do I make this better is I feel like I'm missing some columns right here. What I'm going to do is I'm, again, going to use the same screenshot method as I told you guys. Hold Shift Windows S if you're on Windows. If you're on Mac, just look it up. I have no idea how to do screenshots on Mac. But when you do that, you're going to be able to do a screenshot. I'm literally going to take a screenshot of the spreadsheet, jump back into GPT, and look at this. We're literally doing the same thing we always did. We're setting it and we're throwing a context brain dump of what we're trying to do, right? We're saying, I'd like to create an accurate pricing sheet for everything. The idea is to use this sheet as a reference for pricing and to show which features / integrations / work / CRMs is part of which tier. In order to maximize the value of this sheet and use it as a cheat sheet, how should this be structured? We're going to send that to it and we're going to let it figure out what is the best structure for us to look back at this and maximize it every time we use it. So let's see what it's coming up with. It's saying this sheet is for you. Obviously, it's not going to be for the customer. And again, it's telling us not to structure tiers around features, but instead to do it around operational responsibility. So we're going to see what that looks like. So it's saying, think of the sheet as a 4-stack layer, even if it lives in one spreadsheet. The first one is you're going to have eligibility and fit, who this tier is for. Okay, this is going to be the type of the business. And then you're going to have system scope. This is going to be what we are responsible for doing and building. You're going to have your integrations and your boundaries, and then you're going to have the pricing, which is what this is. So it's saying for column A, it should be the tier name. And look at this. It's also given us the actual tier names that we would say to the customer. So it's saying for tier A, use base operations. For tier B, use load and dispatch control. And then for tier C, use operational stability. The reason why is because these give you more insight or at least an idea of what is the value behind that tier and what it's meant to take care of. So we're going to use those names. I'm literally going to come back here and then I'm going to throw it under this. Instead of base package, we're going to say base operations. Tier B is load and dispatch control. I'm going to throw that down here as well. And then tier C is going to be operational stability. So I'm going to also throw that down here. Now for column B, it's saying the ideal business profile. Okay, this is going to be a brand new column and it's saying it's important. The reason why is because this is going to help classify where the business is supposed to be at and how it's supposed to be treated. So I'm going to jump back into the sheet and I'm going to change column B. We're going to say, instead of CRMs, we're going to say, and then we're going to say business profile instead. Now we have that recommended sheet structure. Now, just to make things easier on your guys' end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm going to analyze all these different columns and what actually needs to go in these columns. And then I'm going to go back to the sheet, cook it all up inside of here, and then I'll jump to the sheet and explain to you guys what it means while we're staring at it visually, just so that way we can move things quicker and you can actually understand it better. And boom, just like that, boys and girls, our pricing structure is fucking done. This is a very big milestone, okay? Because the reason why is now we are officially closing the book on the very first week, on our research phase, on our whiteboard phase. This is literally the backbone for how we're going to be structuring our pricing when we talk to people. Let me explain to you just very briefly while we're looking at this what we're going to do. So let's just say we jump onto a call tomorrow. Okay. When we jump onto a call, we're going to have that very first conversation with the company that is called the discovery call. The reason why is because we're going to want to discover a lot of questions that we have about what they're struggling with, why, etc., all that good stuff. After that discovery call, which by the way, when we actually start selling this, I'm going to show you guys how to do a discovery call. I might even show you some recordings of me doing an actual proper discovery call, but I'll probably decide when the time comes. Either way, however it goes, this is going to be a cheat sheet that we're going to jump back to after we do our discovery call. And we're going to basically take the answers that we found out from the business that we talked to, and we're going to figure out where they belong in this sheet based on their answers. So look at this first column, okay? We're going to try to figure out what is their business profile. Are they a small lead operation, small office? Do they receive 100 to 150 inbound calls per month? Is missed calls a primary source of lost revenue? And do they offer after hours availability? what does that even look like? We're gonna try to fit them into a specific profile. Yes, we are literally stereotyping the business based on what they tell us. This is exactly what we're doing right here. Okay, and we have different profiles that people could fit to based on who they are. So you can see for the mid-tier, we have their growing plumbing business with dispatchers or office staff. They're getting anywhere between 250 to 350 calls per month. They have peak hour call overload, and they have wasted staff time on operational pain points. This is the second profile. And third is going to be if we're talking to an established or a high volume plumbing operation. These guys get anywhere between 500 to 650 calls per month. And you guys can see they're running call center style dynamics with emergency call prioritization. There's more complexity to it. Either way it goes, this is what that profile looks like. Now here in the middle, we have supported CRMs. Obviously for small businesses, we're expecting to see a lot of Jobber, House Call Pro, and Workis. The only difference between this and the second tier is we're adding Service Fusion here. So if somebody has Service Fusion, just off of that fact, because we know Service Fusion is used a lot by those mid-sized businesses, there's probably more complexity into what goes into it. So we're treating this integration as something different and additional to what the default integrations actually are. We're not expected to see them a lot in the small to medium sized businesses. We're still keeping everything else in that first tier, such as Jobber, House Call Pro, and Workis. Now, for any business that is using Service Titan, Field Edge, or Service Fusion, they're probably going to be classified as a higher operational business. Now, for anybody that is using Service Titan, Field Edge, or Service Fusion, again, this is very unlikely to be the case where they're using the system and they are a smaller operation, or maybe they're just getting into being a medium-sized operation, just because these systems are designed more for bigger operations. We're going to say that this lives in this tier C package for those established high-volume plumbing operations. Now, again, we can shuffle these around. This doesn't mean this is like solidified in the cement, done deal, just because they're on the sheet like this. We could very well run into a business that could be using Service Titan, but they belong in a different profile, right? They're not hitting the numbers to be classified as a larger size business, which in that case, we could probably jump them back down into a tier B business, assuming the majority of everything else that we're measuring falls into this bucket. But again, this is meant to be sort of a cheat sheet or a quick guide to help you on average figure out where businesses belong in based on the conversations and who they are. Let's look at the next column. This is the core system responsibility for what our system is supposed to do based on their specific level. Now, by the way, there are things listed here that we are just going to assume if it's listed in the previous package, it's probably also part of the higher tier package. For example, this 24/7 inbound call coverage. I didn't list that in the second or third. The reason why is because we're assuming that everything in here as a responsibility also applies to the next tier because we're only adding more to it. So this is what differentiates our responsibility from the second to the first tier to that third tier, okay? And all this is saying there is more complexity to it. So because of that, we have to do more load management during those peak hours. We have to put more effort into separating high call volume versus low volume. We have to put more effort into prioritizing the revenue producing conversations because obviously the volume of calls is going to be higher and the complexity of how those calls are is going to be higher. And here's what that looks like here for that third tier. Now for call handling, okay, this is what our scope is, aka what we are meant to do when it comes to call handling. Obviously the basic base is going to be unlimited inbound phone call answering, handling different callers based on their intent, no voicemail, and coverage full after hours. But here's where things get a little bit more complex when we're jumping into the second and third tier. You're going to see that as a pattern happening again and again. And you can see what these differences are. It just scales with the complexity of the call handling itself. Now in this column, we have the intake and the data depth. This is us collecting information and knowing what, where, and how we need to store and use that information in that AI system. And again, the same kind of concept. This is just going up in complexity based on the specific tier and what we're expecting them to experience in the level that they're at. Here we have a column that says system stewardship level. What that means, I could probably just rephrase this and just say this is our commitment to them in our package if we were to sell something like a monthly package, okay? We have business hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We do offer configuration maintenance. We offer issue response within the first 12 12 hours, and we offer ongoing ownership of the system's reliability in itself. Basically, making sure everything we build actually is reliable and actually works. This is our core commitment to them when we sell the system. And you can see those get more responsible the higher up you go, because again, there is more risk, there's more operational complexity to these different tiers. Now look at this column. I love this column. This is the exclusions column. This is saying if a business is supposed to be in the tier A, or this first level, they will automatically be excluded from this level if they are dealing with an enterprise FSM, meaning they're using a big, complicated CRM with a very hard integration that's going to take a long time. Automatically, they're not going to be able to fit into this pricing at all. If they have dispatcher-based workflows, this is just basically saying there is more complexity to the call orchestration that we have to add to our voice AI system. They're not going to be able to fit to this. And if they have multiple independent locations, not multiple locations that operate as one, they're not going to fit into this. Or if they need advanced emergency routing logic. This doesn't fall into the same call orchestration that is part of the regular process and operation of the voice system. So they're going to be ruled out of this. And it doesn't even have to be ruled out. It could just be that they end up now automatically on the higher spectrum of this range right here. So yes, we can do advanced emergency routing logic. However, we're not going to be sitting near the 2500 range. We're probably going to be near the 4500 or the 4000 range, wherever we end up at, based on what it is they actually want the emergency routing logic to be. And you can see we have the same thing happening for everything else for all the other tiers. We priced the very first tier anywhere between $2,500 to $4,500. This is just based off of the level of complexity. And this is based off of how much work goes into it, the hardship and the complexity of that work, and where they are in terms of how much volume they're getting. We priced tier 2 at anywhere between $4,000 to $7,000. And tier 3 is going to start at $6,500. And it could go higher than $9,000, obviously, depending on what it is they want the system to do. Now, guys, this is a very, very fair. I can tell you this because I've sold countless numbers of this system, and a lot of those have fallen between $9,000 and $15,000. That is usually the average for the kinds of companies that I was talking to and what it is they're willing to spend for it, just because the justification behind it makes sense, right? They're getting their money back one way or another. It's almost like an investment that comes back 2 or 3 months, and after that it kind of pays for itself. So this is very, very fair for the kinds of businesses we're gonna be talking to. And just like that, folks, we just wrapped up the last 7th day. Tomorrow we are gonna officially start thinking about putting stuff together. We're gonna start bringing everything we researched and put together to life. We're gonna talk about the infrastructure, building what we need to build, and what these things actually are. So I will see you guys tomorrow.